because we're just going to be going through some of the technical stuff, some of the nerdy stuff. Today is going to be the ultimate nerd cast for modular live performers. This is going to be all about the nerdy stuff of the behind the scenes, the setup, the build, the patch, all that kind of stuff. So so if you're online, hop into the chat and just let me know how the levels are for the microphone. If I need to turn it up or turn it down at all, or if it's clipping. It doesn't look like it's clipping, but we'll see. And then, then we're gonna get into a bunch of interesting stuff. Welcome, glad to have you here. Let's see. Hey, what's going on, man? Yo, good to see you, Luke. So welcome to another live stream, another Sunday live stream. So when I first started doing these live streams, there was like three different reasons why I wanted to do live streams. One, because I hate video editing. So I got sick of doing like regular videos and then having to spend hours and hours editing them together. I don't like video editing at all. Let's see. Good afternoon. Levels are good. Sweet. Ruffian, what's going on? Let me know where you're here from. Now that I see Ruffian, I know he's from the Netherlands. I think you're in Rotterdam, I believe. So let me know where you're from. Always super fun. But anyway, the three reasons why I wanted to do these live streams in the first place: hate video editing, so I wanted to get away from that. The second one was I wanted a way to be able to share information that I wasn't seeing being shared by other people in other places in the YouTube world or online or whatever. And then the last one was a lot of this stuff I was just kind of doing anyway, whether it's trying out a new module, whether it's getting ready for a live show, whether it's, practicing, whatever. And so it was a good opportunity to just kind of chat about the behind the scenes and show you what goes on, like kind of what's the behind the scenes stuff. So let's see what we got going here. Christophe from France, bonjour. Germany, California. Sweet. Where we got Rotterdam. Aha. What's up? Berlin. Hey, I know those two guys. I'm actually going to see those two guys next month, I do believe. Little unannounced show that we may be putting together. So I'm pretty excited about that. More Netherlands. Damn, you guys are on it. I think the timing is better for you guys if I do it at 2 o'clock because that's 10 o'clock for you, which when I do them a little later, it's kind of the middle of the night. Krakow, Poland. Awesome. Welcome to all you guys. So what we're going to do today, here, let me switch views to show you the cluster that we're working with here. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about is you guys see a lot, the same rig, the same thing all put together. You see it with the, everything patched. You hear how I use the rig, but a lot, at least for me, a lot of what's the most fun, a lot of what's the best stuff about modular is the fact that you get to build your own instrument that you then get to play live or write songs on or whatever, but you're not just buying a pre-made thing that was designed by somebody and using it the way that they thought was the best way. This way you really get to make your own instrument. So I wanted to talk a little bit today and kind of walk through a little bit today how I make my instrument and the kind of thought process that goes into everything from what modules I choose, where I place them in the rig, how I figure out what's going to fit and what gets placed where. And then after we're going to patch and I'll show you like how I route things and what's the idea behind stuff, behind building a modular that you can then use in the way that you've all seen in a lot of the videos that I've done on here, or if you've seen live shows or whatever. You can, this is where it all begins, right? This is where the magic happens. So, I was hoping to do this with my new case. It hasn't arrived yet. Hopefully it's going to arrive in the next day or so that I can have it to go to KnobCon this week. I have a show in Cleveland, Ohio on Thursday, and then I'm playing in Chicago for KnobCon on Saturday. So anyway, this is for that. And the reason for the changes, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but one of the first things is that there's another module that I wanted to put in, and I'll explain why. And then I wanted to move some things around because it wasn't quite working exactly the way I wanted it to. And again, beautiful thing about modular is you get to customize your own kind of not only workflow, but like ergonomics. Like what do you like to use to do with your right hand? What do you like to do with your left hand? What do you like to have close to you versus farther away? And so that's one of the things that we'll talk about today. So let's see here. What's the new case? So right now I'm using the Morph Modular, which was a prototype of the Explorer case, which just got released this week, and I'm getting the new Explorer case. So I'm getting the full-blown version of this. The difference is the full-blown version of this has this is each one of the sections of this is 6U, so 2 rows. The new one has an additional 1U row in each boat, in each case. So it'll be a 14U 84 instead of a 12U 84. So that, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a sec when we go through how I kind of organize stuff. But yes, so it will be another Morph. I'm a big fan of what these guys are doing. Super nice guys from Italy. They do a lot of work. It's kind of like a mom and pop shop. They're small producers, and they do really well done stuff, well thought through stuff. So I'm excited to get my new case, and I've been loving this one for the last year. Yeah, about a year I've been using this one. So very excited to get the new one. So let's see what else got here. Yes, Morph case. Hey Jason, what's going on? Another French dude in here. So just to get started, one thing I noticed when I was pulling things apart to move stuff around for this, one of the things that I noticed that I never really talked about, but I just wanted to kind of put out there. One thing that I always put in my cases when I'm going to be traveling, particularly when I'm going to be, doing a lot of traveling. As you guys will know, I take my case with me as a carry-on, but sometimes you leave your case in your hotel when you go grab something to eat or whatever, and it's always like it's always this good feeling for me to be able to track what I'm doing. So if you notice right inside here in the modular right there, I think you can see, I have an Apple AirTag taped with gaffer tape on the inside of my case, and I always do that. Just because it's something you can just put in there. You only have to take it out and change the battery like every 2 years or whatever. And just for peace of mind. So nerdy behind the scenes thing, but Apple AirTags are cool so you can track your stuff. And it doesn't have to be an Apple one, but putting in an AirTag, a way to track your stuff is always a good kind of peace of mind. So the next thing I wanted to talk about just really quick is how I decide, because you all have heard me talk on these chats before that I limit myself to an 84 HP case because it fits in a rolling carry-on. So that means that when I want to add modules or try something new or change a configuration, it's kind of a Tetris game to figure out where things go and what's the best way to connect them together. So for those of you who are in modular, which I would assume is everybody who's on here, I mean, you wouldn't have clicked on this if you weren't into this part of it, unless you thought I just broke my gear and that's what the picture was. If you're into modular, you probably use Modular Grid, and that's what I wanted to just show you. I'll switch to, this is very low tech. I have a camera pointed at my screen so you can see my modular grid. And this is, you can see the 2 1U rows that I don't have anything in right now because I'm still deciding how I'm going to use those. It's the case is going to come with some adapters, so I can put some 4 HP things in those. So I may move some of those around. But this is my layout for what we're going to build today. And you'll see some of it is the same. A lot of these modules down here are the same. This Boardbrain IO is going to be added back into the case. And I'll talk about that in a minute because there's a whole process to that and a whole reason for it. But that's part of why I'm moving stuff around. And that meant that I needed to take out what was in this space, which was the oxy pipe. So I moved that up here and then moved some stuff around here. You'll also notice from how I had this before, a lot of these modules here, so like the BIA with its effect and filter, the pizza with its effect and filter, were down in this lower row. And the warp was up above and the Griffin's Claws were up above. I use these ones, the BIA and the pizza, probably more than any other modules in the case. And they used to be down here in this lower row, but when I made this lower row all drums and percussion, I moved them out. And I found that having them in this middle area here, or in the lower row of the top boat, made them harder to get to and harder to use. This row up top was a lot easier to reach, a lot easier to get to. So that was a big change for me, was moving those, because being down low, sometimes they were behind things that I didn't want them behind. So I want them up above where I can reach them easier for performance. And again, this goes back to that idea of ergonomics. Like you can set this up any way you like. So I want the things that I'm adjusting a lot during the performance to be really easy to get to. So this whole upper row now is going to be all voices that I adjust a lot so I can reach out and grab them rather than having to go through cables and behind stuff to get to them. I'm still going to have the warp here, but I don't adjust it as much when I'm in a performance. A lot of the setup of the warp is done beforehand, so then I can just leave it and I don't have to worry too much about it in the actual live performance. So that was one of the reasons for moving stuff around. So in order to do that, switch back over here to Modular Grid. So in order to be able to do that, I needed to make sure that these fit. So if you haven't used Modular Grid, what's cool is that there's like every module in the world, and you can take them virtually and move them around. Oops, I let this wait too long. You can take them virtually and move them around. So if you're not sure if something will fit, it gives you these nice little like differences there where it shows how many HP you still have to use. And so you can move things and put them where you want. Sometimes it doesn't work and you'll be like, oh, I'm short, so maybe I can move something and find a space for something else. So it does become like a Tetris puzzle, but this one, fortunately, I was able to get it to work out. I did have to move some stuff around, but it made it so that this whole upper row can now be my main voices. This is a lot of stuff that's patched and I don't use a lot during the show. So like the oxy pipe and the PAMs, I don't really adjust much during the show. Griffin's Claws I do use, and it's nice now having it actually in the middle because that way I can patch it in both directions to be able to kind of improvise modulation on the fly. Like I said, I don't mess with the warp a lot. The Ghost I do use, but I'm really only using the filter quite often and the delay timing. That's what I adjust the most in performance. So again, I'm not touching this one all the time. And then these are my output modules. So like the Libra Legio, and that's going into the monitor. That's kind of end of chain processing in the Legio. And then this is my output to the main house. And I don't really touch those at all. Once I have them set, I kind of leave those the way they are. So it made it so that I don't need to mess with this row as often. So if it's a little harder to get to behind stuff, it's not a big deal. And then this upper row is going to be free of cables. The other thing that's cool too is a lot of these voices have the patch points on the bottom. So again, the cables will be coming down from there, like down to the mixer and down to everywhere else. So that means that all of the face of them will be free and the knobs are going to be open and accessible during performance. Where if they're on the lower row, the cables from the top one can kind of get in the way as they're coming down, and it makes it harder to get to in a performance. So again, this is cool because you can decide, you can move stuff around, you can see like, does this fit? And oh, this one, if it doesn't fit, then we'll move it and put something else in its place. So anyway, Modular Grid is super, super handy tool. for doing all the nerdy stuff of building a modular case. So yeah, so that's how I figured out what I'm going to put. And so then it was just a matter of building it, putting it all together, and then figuring out how I want to patch it. So yeah, so that's what we're going to go to next. Let's see where we are. 3D printed AirTag holder for my case. That is cool. I like that. Hey, what's going on, Proto Buffer? Doesn't 104 HP also work with handbag airline regulations? So good question. 104 HP works just barely for hand luggage if you're using only the modular case as your hand luggage. And the difference with an 84 versus a 104 is that an 84 will fit inside a rolling trolley, a rolling carry-on bag. And I prefer that with all the travel that I do and running through airports and getting from one place to another, having, 30 pounds, 15 kilos worth of modular gear in a shoulder strap because you're just using just the modular itself or carrying it with your hand is a giant hassle. Being able to put this into a rolling bag and then put my backpack on top of the rolling bag is so much easier for travel through airports, through train stations, all of that stuff. So yes, you can use 104, but it has to be your carry-on. The case has to be your carry-on. Otherwise it will be too long. With this, I can put this inside a rolling bag, and inside that bag, I have space for the power supply, my Oxy One sequencer, a whole bunch of cables, backup cables, a bunch of the little connections, things like the Oxy Split and all that can all go in that rolling bag, and I don't have to lift and carry any of it through airports and train stations. So much, much more handy. If you can get down to an 84, way more handy. And that's one of the things that I love with Morph. This was one of the only 12U 84s out there in this type of a folding format. So really, really handy to have this 12U or 14U 84 to be able to fit into a rolling bag. So very, very important. What else? James, what's going on? Good to see you. Monumatic black panel is crucial. Did you try it out yet? I have not. I actually reached out to Nabila because I would love to try the Monumatic, and I have not heard back from them. So yeah, it's I guess I wasn't cool enough to merit a test module, but I'll definitely give it a try. I did try it at Superbooth, but I didn't have a time to really dig into it, and I love the sounds that I've heard from it that other people are using. So yeah, it's a good one. Let's see. Now I have the Samarcanda in my case. Takes up a lot of space, but I love it. Yeah, that's always the trade-off with portable, a travel rig versus a studio rig. So there's all these things that you really love. You love the sound of, you love, whatever, but they may not fit, or you have to sacrifice in order to be able to get things in. And I think it's good when you limit yourself to the size of your travel case, because it means that you're going to make those decisions with some limit, some structure, and say, okay, this is all the space I have. So how bad do I really want this module in the case? Do I want it so bad that it's worth taking out these other two? And then you go, I don't know, I might not use that. And that's why things come and go for my case. People will always ask me, it's like, oh, you don't like this anymore, or you're not using that anymore. And it's like, yeah, I didn't have space for it. So I had to prioritize. Like right now I have 4 84 HP rows that I can work with. And so I have to prioritize, and that's that number of HP on a list. And if you're the next one down on that list, you don't make it in the case. And those things end up in my studio case. And then, as I'm moving things around, if I feel like I'm really missing something or I want to add something in, then I can add those in. So anyway, it's, yeah, those are the way I think about that kind of stuff. What else here? Oh, damn, they're actually valid points, but I kind of don't think that I'll be able to go down to 84 HP. Oh, you can do it, man. You can do it. It's like, so I'll tell you the hardest things for me about getting down to 84, and it's going to actually be a lot easier with the new morph cases because you've got those 1U rows. So you can really pull out a lot of random things that you can fit in 1U. You can also use those adapters so you can take 4 HP stuff and turn it sideways and put it in there. And that frees up space. So you do gain some space that way. But the hardest things for me is I use a lot of mixing, which we're going to talk about in a minute because that's one of the big reasons why we're doing this build today. I do a lot of mixing in the case, and that takes up a lot of space. And I was able to take out of the case sequencing by using the Oxy One, which it was a huge change. Because before I was using, in my studio case, WMD Metron, which in a case this size would take up about half of the lower row. And so, being able to take that out freed up a ton of space to be able to use other stuff in the case. And we'll talk a little bit more about why and how. But one of the other things, I was talking to one of my students this week in one of the online course chats, and one of the things that he hadn't realized by looking at my gear, and this is a big space saver for me, I don't have really any modulation built in my case. And it's because in my live performances, I want to modulate things manually. That's the show. That's the performance. And so I do have the Griffin's clause where I can do some modulation and save it and have it go. But I don't have a whole bunch of outside modulation. The other thing is I like to use, again, for space saving, I like to use whole voices that all go together. So like, for example, Ergosyn's bass line, this is everything all in one. So it's got oscillator, sub-oscillator, it has FM level, it has a filter built in, it has filter envelope, amp envelope, it has multiple waves, everything all in 14 HP. So to be able to get modules like that you can fit a lot of stuff in a really small space is how I'm able to go to 84 HP. Of course I would love to have more space. And if I was gonna build out whole voices where I wanted if I was to pull stuff out of my studio case and put like a DPO oscillator that takes like this much space, then it needs VCA, needs envelopes, it needs filter, needs all that stuff. That would take up an entire row. So there's no way that I could have the flexibility in my case that I have if I was doing whole voices, or if I was doing non-whole voices, if I was building the voices in the case. So I do that in my studio case often, but not in this one. So we'll see as I gain those 1U rows. I may do some stuff with like adding in one kind of more experimental, flexible voice to be able to do some more stuff with. But for me, that's space saving is way more important. So that's why I have the voices that I have in my case. A couple other things too. I don't have a sampler in the case because I use the 1010 black box and I have that on the outside, or I use the Digitact or other things outside. I keep my sequencing outside of the case. I have MIDI controller to be able to control other stuff. So like I'm setting it up to control the Oxy. So I've got 8 voices in the Oxy One and I can control those with an external MIDI controller. So I don't need a whole bunch of CV control and all that kind of stuff with this. I can control these via MIDI, which is another thing that makes it pretty easy. So I can use the MIDI out from the Oxy One and go into modules like the Polycinematic and the Choral. So a lot of the decision making is built around that idea of space saving, right? So that I can fit everything in here. So anyway, a few more questions and then we'll get into the build here. Delay to rule them all, yeah. Let's see here. Space and other like routing is why it shows our mixa, noise engineering is the main mixer. Yeah, it's that's a great mixer. I had a lot of fun messing around with that one at KnobCon last year. The thing for me, and we'll talk a little bit more about mixing because that's like, again, like a big point of this. That one is just too small for me. For the way I use a mixer when I play live, I can't use those little tiny little sliders and, you know, like little, I would need like tweezers to get in there. It's cool if you want to kind of set things and you're not really using your mixer a lot, but coming from the DJ world, I play the mixer all the time. Like my hands are always doing something on the mixer. So to have it spread out, have long throw faders, have larger knobs for things like effect sends is really important for me. So that's why I couldn't use this Air Mixer, but I love the mixer itself. It's pretty cool. And also the Boardbrain is all analog, which is pretty neat as well, and all stereo. So you lose size. It becomes bigger, so you lose space. You gain size, I guess. If it's analog, when it's digital, you can keep things really small and get a lot of functionality in it. So those are just kind of trade-offs that you get. Let's see here. Simon from Melbourne. Awesome. Welcome, welcome. Good to have you. I have a lot of modulation, but I'll use my meta module for that. Oh yeah, nice. The one that you can load the VCV rack in. That's pretty cool. James, been rocking this Air Mixer for a minute and been great for the HP. Yes, for sure. Having full voice in a module is great, but modular is also great to have choice for modulations, filter, etc. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, again, I have a few that are complete voices like the bass line. Most of the full voices that I use are things like the Bastel Pizza, where it has an envelope and a VCA built into it, but it has its own external filter, so you can mix and match those things. So yeah, I've kind of a mix of those things, but try to keep them relatively small in order for those to fit in. And yeah, so again, it's just priorities. For me, the priority isn't automated modulation, so that's why I don't take up HP with that. For me is diversity of sounds and playability. So that's kind of what goes into my decision-making process. So let's just jump in really quick on what we're gonna do the first thing with this build. A couple normal nerdy things. If you can see on the picture here, when I take my case apart, I organize my cables by size. So I've got like these short little guys, if you can see this, yeah, here. Short little guys, and then like different levels all the way out. So that way when it comes time to patch, I've got those all set up. So that's what this mess of cables is over here on the side. I also like to keep my knurlies and stuff right here with me. So when I take things apart, I just put them right in there instead of trying to, you know, like sometimes you get this idea that's like, oh, I'm only taking it out for a second, so I'm just gonna put it on the side. And then inevitably you end up losing it or putting one inside your case by mistake or whatever. So I always keep the container here. So that's kind of like the behind the scenes. Here's another little tip. If you're going to KnobCon, or if you're going to Buchla and Friends in January, or if you go to Super Booth, one of the best pieces of swag that you can pick up free from one of the tables is these little noise engineering screwdrivers. They are so good because you've got Phillips on one side, flathead on the other, and they're awesome. I have one of these in my studio. I have one of those in my travel bag. I always take them with me, and yeah, they're pretty awesome. So shout out to Patrick. You guys have the best swag out there with these little practical screwdrivers. So yeah, so I'll have that here ready to go. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add in this module, which is the I/O from Boardbrain, and this is a way to multi-track out of your case. I have been producing a bunch more stuff lately. I have a record label that wants to do an EP release, and I need to get some multi-track stuff so that I can clean it up in a way that they like for their mastering engineer. So I need to be able to very easily multi-track out of the case. So that's really what the I/O is for. This is an unpowered module, which is great. So it doesn't take up power supply or any of that stuff. But what it does is, if you look here on the back, I don't know how well you can see this. Let's see here. Yeah, if you look on the back, it has all of these points where you can patch in cables behind the module to the back side of the Boardbrain mixing stuff. So if you look here on the back of, this is the Boardbrain Epsilon mixer, which you've probably seen if you've watched any of these videos before. If you look on the back of the Epsilon, I'll move these cables out of the way here. There is a whole bunch of stuff going on. And it's funny because you never see the back of this, which is where, like, it's one of the best parts about this, is the back end of this mixing setup. So you'll notice all of these connection points on here. So this is a 6-channel stereo mixer, this main one. And what you have for patch points here is it says channel 1 through 3 post direct out. And over here, it's channel 1 through 3 pre-direct out. So that's pre-fader, post-fader, okay? So because of that, having that pre-fader, post-fader, you can choose, or you can actually patch into both. And when you patch it into the I/O, it gives you 3.5 millimeter outputs of that signal. So you don't have to repatch out from your mixer when you want to multi-track. One of the big pluses of the Boardbrain system is that you can set it up this way. So that way you can actually, like, I can multi-track record live when I'm playing a show. Whereas if I was to use something else like the ES9, for example, you have to patch into it and then out to your multi-track, and you lose the mix capability. So here, if I was just using this mixer and I didn't have the expanders, I could take 1 through 3 pre-fader and put that into these two. So I would have stereo 6-channel out pre-fader, and then I could put the post-fader into these two and have stereo 6-channel out post-fader. And then you have the ability to patch that any way you like. You can decide how you want to multi-track out from there. Because I'm using 2 different expanders, I'm going to only use the pre-fader outs this time, but you do have the flexibility to change this, which is amazing. The other thing that you have that you can't, I'm sure you can't see because it's really small, but the last patch point down on the bottom is, it says in and out 25 through 30. What that is for this last patch point here, which is your 2 stereo returns for your stereo sends and your stereo master from mix A going out of your mixer. So what that does is these ones are, all of these are just regular TS patch point mono, but so there's 2 of them in order to make a stereo. Each one of these on the bottom is a TRS, and so these are all stereo outs for the stereo returns, stereo return 1, stereo return 2, and main mix out. So you have a ton of patching options to get out of this into an audio interface, into an ADAT output, into whatever. So if you were using, for example, I have in my studio case the Boardbrain, what's it called? Oh my God, it just totally went out of my head. The optics is their output for ADAT. So you could put that ADAT module right next to this. You can patch really short from one end to the other, and then you only need one ADAT cable out to your ADAT audio interface to be able to multi-track, which is pretty handy. With this, you can use all sorts of different ways to go out. So you could use an ES9 from here and then just take this directly out. You could use an ES8 as well to save some space. And these are I/O, so these can be input and output, which is pretty cool as well. There's other things that you can plug these into. So that's why one of the reasons why we're doing this build today is because I wanted to build this into the case. So how do we do this? So we've got these cables that come with this. So we're going to get started first and foremost by putting this into our in-out 1 through 6, right? Which is going to be going to, so that's 1 through 6 stereo. So it's 3 stereo channels. And this is going to be going into my pre-fader 1 through 3 in the backside of the mixer. Then we're going to do the exact same thing over here. And that's going to go to, And if you notice, I'm passing these underneath so that way when I close everything up, it'll still all work together. So this is going to go to the next set, which is 4 through 6. So right now, these top will be 3 stereo, and then the next will be 3 stereo to get those outputs when it comes time to multi-track out. Then the next thing we're going to do is go to the first one of the expanders. So I'll be able to have, ultimately, when I'm done with this, I'll be able to have 12 stereo outs, okay? So this is gonna go to, again, pre-fader. And this last one is gonna be harder to reach. So I'm gonna patch this a little different. I'm gonna patch pre, coming out of that. And then I'm gonna put this kind of down in its space to be able to make the cable reach all the way, which is still pretty tight. Yeah, I might have to do that one in a sec when I flip everything down. And then the last one is going to be that the main outputs for your master and your effects returns. So I'm going to do those around. This one is a little easier to reach. Okay. And then once that's all set, then I can flip these back down into their positions here. So they all fit into the case. Where was that last cable? There it is. Move it over just a little bit so that I can patch it. Yeah, I wish this one cable for the farthest one was just slightly longer, but whatever. Oops, patch that one backwards. All right, so now that will go in. This can slide back down into its place. And there we go. So that's where that's gonna go. And then all of this is patched behind the scenes. So now I have multi-track out 12 stereo channels plus 2 stereo returns plus the main. And those all patch out from a little 8 HP non-powered module. So being able to do this is really a space saver, and it's really convenient if you're going to be trying to multi-track out. You know, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever, you have to use it with the Boardbrain system, but it's one of the things that I really love about Boardbrain is that they're truly a mixer company. So what they're doing is things that are all involved with like input and output of signals, rather than trying to create, you know, drum modules and VCAs and filters and effects and whatever. They're really focused on audio processing pathways, which I think is great. And Adam is super anal retentive about it, which I love that he's like super into really, really high quality of the signal paths. So now that we have those in here, that's all patched behind the scenes. So now I won't have to worry about that anymore. And this thing just kind of sits here until I need it. One thing that's a really handy thing with having these patch points out is it gives you a lot of opportunities to patch in different ways. So if you were going to use, like I said, an ADAT converter like the Optics, and you were to just put that right next to this, you just patch across and then you have one ADAT cable out. Or if you have an audio interface that has multiple inputs in your home studio and you want to record from your modular, if this is right next to your audio interface, you can just take 3.5 millimeter to 1/4 inch cables and patch directly into your audio interface right next to you. And that way you've got all of these kind of patch points out already sorted out, and it's really handy. It's also cool. I use this often when I'm performing. So like right now, I have a pre-fader. So let's see, on channel 1, we're gonna have our kick drum. The battering ram goes into channel 1. So that means that channel 1 here is a pre-fader multiple of the kick drum. And so if you wanted to send that to something to be able to sidechain, you can just take that out. Often I will take that out and go into one of the inputs of the Digitact and then assign that input as the trigger for the internal sidechain in the Digitact. And so that way I can sidechain things from the kick that's in the case because I've already got an audio multiple of that coming out. You can also use this for parallel processing when you're playing live. So like right now, if I wanted to have another signal of, let's say the kick, and I wanted to have that, one of them compressed, one of them non-compressed, I can have one go straight into one channel, then I can send another one through a compressor and have it come back into another channel. And that way I have individual control over parallel processing, which is pretty cool too. So the IO is pretty, is a pretty handy piece of this whole Boardbrain world ecosystem, whatever you want to call it. I guess ecosystem is the trendy word to use. So yeah, it's a very important part of all that. So now basically all of the mixing stuff and all of this lowercase are all back together. Great thing about the knurlies, if you don't use them, is that you can screw everything in by hand and then you just go back through with your screwdriver and give it just a little tighten. And that way, everything's there and you don't have to like deal with the screwdriver all the way from the top on every one of them, which can be really handy. So yeah, so then I'll just tighten these down to make sure that everything kind of stays in place because this will rattle around when I'm traveling. So I just want to make sure that everything is tightened properly. So yeah. So there we go. So that's the lower case, which for my live setup, my lower case is mixing all the way across the bottom with my performance effects, the Oxy Meta over here on the side. And then this whole row now is all drums and percussion. So we've got main kick, which is the Ohm Force Bohm system of kick, secondary kick, battering ram, hats, archer's rig, and then a whole bunch of other cool percussion, Percon's voice. And then I have the Desmodus Versio reverb, which I put on one of my effect sends. And because the effect sends come out right here, I just put it right there. So it's an easy patch to go out and back in. And I use that as an effect send for here. And again, this goes back to the modular grid thing. When you're messing around with the modular grid, it's like, oh, I can make 10 HP here. That's perfect because then I can fit in this effect that I want to have in that spot. And you can really decide where you want to put stuff, right? It's instead of putting the effect over here or over here, I can put it right where it's going to patch. The Bohm, because it requires main out, and then in order to do the sidechain stuff, I put it on this side because the main out goes in here. And that's coming from my main out on my mixer, which is right here. So it's a short patch across. Then the output from that goes into the Oxy Meta, which is right next to it as well, before it goes to the output module. So again, physically putting things to where you have to patch less, because I am not a fan of like the patched everywhere spaghetti modular. And so I really try to avoid that as much as possible. So anyway, so now what we're gonna do, we'll go for questions again. Let's see here. How noisy is this mixer? Not at all. It has probably the cleanest audio signal path that I have ever heard in a modular mixer. And I mean, I would put this multi-channel analog mixer on par with mixers like the Allen and Heath zone mixers, like as far as quality goes. Adam that owns Boardbrain is an audio engineer, super crazy about audio sound quality. And so, he will he will make these tiny little minute adjustments in his products before he puts them out in order to make sure that there's absolutely zero noise, that it's like the cleanest possible signal that you can possibly get. So not loud at all is what I would say. If that's what you mean as far as noise goes. Let's see here. For noise engineering, will be again at Super. I'm sure they'll be at Super Booth. I know for sure they're going to be at KnobCon next week, and they have a new module coming out today. They've been teasing all this stuff on their socials that they have a module coming out. They may have already announced it, but I was checking that out earlier today. I don't know what it is, but I'm excited to see. Why not ADAC expander? I don't know. I'm instead of what? I'm not sure what you're asking. So if you clarify that a little bit more, I'm happy to answer. Hey, from Manchester, UK. Awesome. Love the knurlies, but they don't like my fingers sometimes. They have rough splintered edges and I just get finger rash. So yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing is you can use a screwdriver. Like you get both. So I like to be able to tighten them in by hand and then do the last thing with a screwdriver, but I like the flexibility. I think they look cool too. Let's see here. So glad I don't need to do all this cabling stuff. What was that? I don't know what that was for. Because I use digital mixer, inside push 3 standalone. Yeah, I mean, it all comes back to what you want to do. I don't know if you can see over my shoulder here. I have a push 3 standalone right there. And I have tried it. And it's just not my thing for live performance. It doesn't, for me personally, doesn't feel hands-on enough unless you use a MIDI controller. And then you're talking about like the Push 3, which is gigantic and super heavy, and an additional MIDI controller just to make it feel like a mixer, that I can just put a mixer and have, you know, all those things that I want in a performance mixer. So again, personal preference. I have a lot of friends. I know Travarsi's using the Push 3 now. I know Alex has used mixing in his computer with Bitwig and a MIDI controller. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. Like and again, the beautiful thing about Modular is that you create your own instrument. I want a mixer. Like I want to be able to move multiple faders at once, where if I'm in let's say the Push 3 without a MIDI controller, I can't move multiple faders at once. I can only move 2 things at once because they're knobs instead of faders. I need the faders. But then I would attach that to a MIDI controller, and then I've just got a huge device and a smaller device to do something that I can just put in the case. So that's where I like my mentality on it. And again, once it's all patched, it's pretty clean and the sound is unparalleled. It's pretty amazing. Let's see here. Spaghetti mode looks like my system. Yeah, spaghetti mode looks like most modular systems, I think. Hey, Christopher, FX Music. Well, now, Christopher's a good example of a non-spaghetti mode modular. He has one of the most organized, well laid out, well cable managed modular systems I've ever seen. So he's the opposite of the spaghetti mode guy. Instead of IO expander, you have for per track recording. Okay, so the reason why is with something like the ADAC or with the expert sleepers like the ES9, ES8, you have to patch your signal into the front of the module and like from your modular case. And then you patch it out to your external, wherever you're recording to. And so like with the ES8, ES9, you can go out via ADAT or USB. And so there's ways that you can get to your computer and you don't have to worry about that. But what the challenge is I don't want to unpatch and repatch my case every day, you know, and when I go to a show and when I come back to do a recording session and a production session. So what this allows me to do is now I just pretend like this module is not even there. I patch my whole case through my mixer exactly the way I would normally patch my case. And then when I want to do a recording session, I just patch out. And I don't have to unpatch my mixer in order to patch out. The other thing is, if I was to connect, like you saw that I did the pre-fader version of all of the output signals for multi-tracking. But if you do the post-fader version of all those signals, and then you multi-track out, you actually get your volume level differences, your pan changes, all of the output differences, gain differences, everything that you do in the mixer gets then sent out through the I/O to whatever you're going out to. So because of that, that's why I use it this way rather than ADAC or an Expert Sleepers, is because I don't have to patch and unpatch ever. You know, I could leave this just like this. And even if I change out all my modules, all my voices, all of everything, as long as they're patched into the mixer, which they have to be in order to perform, then they're set up here to go as outputs. So it's really, really very handy to be able to have it this way. So that's why I don't use the ADAC. All right, where are we at here? You share this setup design in Modular Grid. Yes, I will. I just finished it last night, so I haven't made it public yet, but I will. Yeah, exactly. And well, yeah, the extra patching capabilities is another part of it. I like having these available, whether it's to patch out to use those signals or whether it's to patch out. Like, for example, if I was going to play a live show, like my live show that I'm playing this week, the 2 shows I'm playing this week, if I wanted to record those shows and have a recording from the master and have multi-track recordings of every single channel from my live performance, all I would need to do with this particular setup is have a way to patch these into a recording thing. So if you wanted to use your computer, you could patch these into an audio interface and then have that go via USB to your computer. If you wanted to go via ADAT, you could put in an ADAT kind of patch device in between. What I will be doing is I'm getting the way I've decided that I want to do this for live performance is with a 1010 Blue box. Because that has 12 mono or 6 stereo inputs on the back of it. So what I'm going to do when I perform live is I'm just going to set a Blue box right here next to my computer or next to my modular. I'm going to patch directly into it, really short right there. And then when it comes time to record my set, I can just hit record directly to an SD card, and I have all of my multi-track going directly to SD that I can then just put into my computer, drag into Ableton, and that way I don't have to have a computer on stage to record. I don't have to have a huge audio interface. I don't have to have all that stuff. So this is going to go straight to a 1010 Blue box that's going to be right here on the side for multi-tracking out live performances. So yeah, that's it. What do we got here? Try my best to keep a good cable management. Yeah, you do. When Christopher did my course, when we were doing 101 and I first saw his case, I was like, man, that is the prettiest cable management I've ever seen in anyone's modular. Like it's slick. Check out on his YouTube channel. He's got some videos of his stuff, so definitely check it out. But yeah, he's a cable manager. Referring to this one, it doesn't require repatching and supports native connectors. I don't know. I'll have to look that up. Shoot me a link in the comments of the video, and I'll check out what you're looking at, because it's another way to do it. The thing is that depending on what that output is, it just depends on what you want to put on the other end of it. So if it's an ADAT, you need something that converts ADAT into a signal that your computer can read. If it's going to be audio outputs, you need to have multi-track input that you can have that connect to. So it just all depends on what you want to have on the other end. If it is already a multi-track out audio interface like the ES9, that's cool, and you can use that as well with the IO. So yeah, there's a ton of different ways to do it. So I just like the flexibility of this this one. And I love how it integrates with the system, and that it's that I can do 12 stereo channels plus the returns and all that in such a tiny little space. That for me is the biggest thing. And the fact that it is unpowered, so it doesn't take up another part of my power supply. So all those reasons are why I chose this one. So let's see what else. Is that a custom made case? No, this is a case from Modular in Italy. They are, if you go on their website, this is a prototype of their case that just came out, which is called the Explorer case. And they build all of the interior electronics. They build the connections that go between the cases, which are super solid. So you only need one power brick to control two cases, which is really great. So yeah, they've got a lot of cool stuff that they do. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start patching the upper section here. A couple tricks that I've learned over time is I like to leave out some of the largest modules, no matter where they are in the area. I leave those out for last just to make space. And sometimes I actually will take modules and just leave them patched, but take them out. So I'll do that here with the Ghost, just because it's a big module and it gives me a lot of visibility into the internal power supplies, because it can be kind of a mess to try to weave those through once you start getting stuff attached in here. So what we're going to do here is just take out the Ghost and just set it down. So that way I have access into all of the different rows of power supply. Now again, if we go back to, turn my computer back on here so we can go back to that view. Let's see here. Where are we at? There we go. If we go back to the modular grid view here, you'll see that there's a lot more modules in the upper section, the ones that are going to go in the top row. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 modules are going to fit into that space, where on the next row down in a much larger space, we only have 1, 2, 3, 4 modules. And so again, I want to try to put in the modules that are going to be the most finicky. I don't want to be like threading things through tiny modules. So I'm going to do the top row first, so that way I can still have access to everything down here as I do the top row. So the beautiful thing is with Modular Grid, I can just pull that up on my computer, and I already have it organized and structured. So I'm just going to go one by one and put these through. Obviously, and there may be some people watching this that aren't doing modular or have never done modular, and they're curious about what it takes. So I'll talk through a few basic things as I'm doing this. So if this is too basic for some of you, just, I don't know, listen to music or whatever. But it's really important that you always have the red stripe on these ribbon cables. You notice there's a red stripe on one end. It'll be marked on the module which side that has to be. And in the case, generally these connectors have a little notch in them, so they can only go in one way. And that makes sure that you don't send the signal into your module the wrong way and actually burn your module. So once you have these connected in here, you can just kind of reach in. I'm a big fan also of connecting whatever your power supply is, connecting it as far away as you can reach, so that you don't just take up the ones here and then you end up with your last module and you've got to stretch it somewhere and you can't reach it. So I'm going to put that in, lay it down flat so that I can still connect all of the other ones. So let's see, next is carbon. So again, these are already connected the correct way on the modules, and then I just have to make sure that they're connected here and they fit into those little notches. Let's see. Next is going to be a multiple, which doesn't need power, so I'm just going to leave that there. Next is pizza, which again, plug in right there. And you'll see it goes pretty quick if you've already got it organized and you kind of like lay things out in a way that keeps you organized. And so you're not like experimenting and you get it all set up and it doesn't work. And I don't know, it ends up being a bit of a hassle. I do need to grab one effect out of my studio case. I thought I had grabbed all of these before I got started, but I forgot to take one out. This is one of the Versio modules from Noise Engineering that is set up as the Yester Versio. So it's kind of a delay plus, I guess I would call it. It's a delay, but does a lot of things besides that. And it sounds really cool and creative. So that's going to go in here. Yeah, and lay that down. And then we've got Vil Ruina, which is our filter for this voice. Okay, and then the last thing is the BIA, which is the voice. The voice itself. All right, and now I'm just going to start putting these all in here. Go back to see the chat in case there's any questions here. And a lot of times I'll just put in like one screw until I get to the end, just in case I have to change something around or the spacing isn't quite right between modules. And it gives me a way to modify things while I'm going along without having to put in and take out every single module again. So yeah. Another thing that I really like about the Neuralies is because, again, you can just put these in really quick with your hand, and it makes this whole process go pretty fast. So then you don't have to worry too much. This is where I believe, yeah. So we're going to put in our multiple. And again, I'll explain why these are going where they're going in just a minute. But I want to just get all these in there. Tuck those power supplies in. I always check and make sure as well as I'm putting these in that the cable connector on the back of each module is really well connected, because sometimes as you're moving them around, putting them back in, those connectors can get loose. And then when you power everything up, it doesn't work. And then you have to pull everything back apart again. You might already have everything patched probably. And it just becomes a pain to get all that stuff out of there. All right, so it seems like everything fits the way it's supposed to. I'm gonna keep screwing these in while I look at some of the questions here. Used to work in German television station handling camera cables as a student job for some years. Yeah, that'll get you to be a cable management guy for sure. Let's see, I don't know if I remember correctly, but I think you mentioned you were getting a bigger case. Yeah, the case itself is basically the same size as this. It just, each one of the boats has a 1U row added. So it's still gonna be 84 HP wide, but it will be 14U instead of 12U 84. So it gives me a couple rows of 1U that I can add in some 1U modules, or I've got some adapters coming so that I can put in some of these 4 HP modules sideways in the 1U rows if I want to do that. So it'll save me space. It'll allow me to maybe add in something else into the case if I choose to later on, which is, yeah, a possibility. As you guys will know if you've watched any of my stuff, my case changes all the time. So, and most of the time it's pretty funny because anytime I change the case, I inevitably get all of these, DMs and comments and all that stuff like, oh, why did you take this out? You don't like it anymore? Or did something go wrong? Or was it bad? Or whatever. And it's like, sometimes I just change my mind. Sometimes I just feel like I'm tired of something, or I've used it too much, or maybe it was just slightly the wrong size and I needed to fit something else in, so it just didn't make the cut. So like, for example, the way I had these modules before in this, when these were down in the lower row, I had less space in this row. And this is kind of like the 10 HP the 8 HP that I took for the IO. So I had less space in this row. And so I wasn't able to use the Yester Versio. That's why it was in my studio case. So instead I had another one of the FX aids here. So instead of 10 HP, it was 6, saved me the 4 HP, and I was able to fit them both in there. So being able to do that is, for me, it's a really important part of this whole process. So anyway, what other questions do we have here? Sorry for asking something. Oh yeah, no problem. Keep asking. I love the questions. That's what we're here for. That's why I do these live, is because it kind of got frustrating. And I talk to other friends of mine who have YouTube channels, and one of the things that gets really frustrating is you're always trying to second guess what your audience really wants. And then you have to like try something and it doesn't work, and then you try something different and it doesn't work, and you try something different and then it finally works, but you're not really sure why it works. So then you want to replicate that more and more often, just so that you can have videos that people are interested in and that they engage with. And if you do live streaming like this, I don't have to second guess what you guys want to ask questions about, because you just ask the questions. And that for me is one of the really cool things with the live streaming part of it, right? Is being able to have direct communication, so you guys can just ask what you need. All right, so that row is set to go. Let's see, what else do we have here? Go back to questions. I'm one of these people who's never done modular and is curious about even the basic stuff. Awesome, I'm glad. I figured there would be some of those, because for some of you, you do this all the time. You already know what's going on and you want to know why I'm setting it up the way I am. But I think there's got to be some of you, I guess like you, who's curious. And I want to show people that modular can look really scary. And I hear that a lot. Like, people get intimidated when they see modular because of all the cables and all the knobs and buttons, and it looks like a spaceship and whatever. But the reality is that it's not that complicated. Each one of these modules is like a synth, or combinations of the 2 or 3 modules can be a synth, just like a synth would be on your desk. And all I'm connecting here on this backside is a power supply, which is just like plugging your synth into the wall, except I just plug these all into this power supply that's in here, and I connect one outlet to the wall that powers all of it. But it's all the same thing. Like, it's not that different. The other thing is, all of the patch cables that we're gonna do in just a little bit that we patch on the front side, those are all in your normal synth. They're just on the back side of the panel, and they're all patched one way, and you don't have any flexibility to change that patching. And with this, I can, if I don't like this filter, I can patch this into this filter and try something different. Whereas with your regular synth, you've got this one architecture that they've designed to sound and act a certain way. And so you don't have that same amount of flexibility. And that's really the big difference. All right. So again, on this row, we're going to start with things that are smaller and leave the biggest spaces, just so that we've got room to get our hands inside the case. First and foremost, the Oxy pipe, which is what connects my sequencer to everything in the case. And a beautiful thing with the pipe, just like with the IO, is that it is unpowered. So I don't have to worry about a power supply for that one. I can just screw it in and it's ready to go. I also have, let's see, is this over here? this go? I can't find my little spacer. So I have a little 2 HP, here it is. And again, when you're using the modular grid, you can see where you don't have space. Anytime there's 2 HP of space, my options are either putting in another multiple, just because it's always cool to have something that you can use to multiply. But since I know Christopher's on here, these spacers, these little 2 HP spacers that say, "This synth kills fascists," I always try to make space for this in my case for personal political reasons. But Christopher, who is on this chat right now, FX Music, is the one who makes these. So thank you for this amazing representation of modern politics in the United States as a German. All right, so let's see what is next here. I'm late. Good to check out. Now jumping back to the start. Oh, okay, cool. Desmodus is a Versio, so you can switch firmwares. Yeah, exactly. So the Yester can be, like any of the Versios can be any of the Versios. So I could make this another Desmodus. What I like to do in my setup is I like to have a send reverb, which is what the Desmodus is acting like here. And I like to have insert effects that are set up as delays. So I can use the delay per voice and change delay timings per voice to do interesting modulation when I'm playing live. And then I like to have reverb to just kind of set mood and atmosphere and create energy and stuff. And I can do that all through the effect sends. So I generally will put these on delay. I will set these up generally as delays and have the send be a reverb. So let's see here. Legio and Olia. Yes, I have a Legio right here. It actually says Rucha Legio, which is a filter, but that's not how I'm using it. I'm using it as the Libra Legio, which is basically an end of chain processing that has saturation, limiting, and compression in one thing, all at the end. I don't use the compression, but I use the other two. To use both warp and choral for polyphonic stuff like chords. I don't generally do polyphonic stuff like chords, and if I do, I use the polycinematic just because it's a lot easier for me to basically just detune and create chords that sound cool. I use the oxychoral as 8 monophonic voices rather than using it as one 8-voice polyphonic voice. And with the warp, I like to use that as complex monophonic voices, so I can have like detuned multi-oscillator voices with that. So that's the way that's going to be used. So yeah, what else here? Do you keep modules you've stopped using for some potential future use case, or just sell them? Like 2D rack for studio work, sound design, whatever. Yes, I have a 15U 126 rack right over there, which is a ginormous studio rack that I use, that is kind of like my library and studio case. So anytime something comes out of here, it goes in there. And every once in a while, if I notice that if it never makes it back to the case and it never kind of is part of the rotation, or if it's something that I use and I just don't like, those ones I'll sell or I'll trade generally for other modules. But for the most part, I do keep stuff when I take it out, because I never know when it's going to come back in. Particularly, if you're moving stuff around and you're taking things in and out, sometimes you'll have a space and be like, oh, I can fit that back in there that I haven't used in a while. And it can be fun, kind of creative. So yeah. Let's see what else. When deciding whether a module goes into a case, sound function and size is important, isn't it? And sometimes the color of the panel. Yeah, well, you'll notice I'm a fan of black panels. I actually get a lot of panels because they're black. I will, as we're putting these in, here's an example. Pam's Pro Workout is normally a silver module, but I was able to order a black faceplate for it. so that it goes with the aesthetic that I like. And it's partially an aesthetic thing, and it's partially a vision thing. For me personally, I find it much easier to see white writing on black panels in a dark room. And so for me, it's a lot easier when I'm playing in a club to be able to look down and see things, because like you like to think that you remember what every single function is, but it's not always the case. So I prefer, just from a visibility standpoint, to be able to have black panels with white writing on them. Just makes them, yeah. It's a functional thing and an aesthetic thing. Black looks more techno, right? So yeah. So that is thing. Let's see here. Griffin's claws. And then all we've got left is warp. And then we're going to start patching. So, why is that not going in there? There we go. And again, I'm going to leave this out just so I've got some space. You always want to try to make it as easy on yourself as you possibly can when you're putting this stuff in. So again, you see all this space, and there's only 3 modules to go in there. So that's why I leave the big modules till the end. So I've got plenty of space to get in there and move things around, adjust things. And then right at the end, it's easy to just kind of put these last ones in. And we are, we're good to go. So again, just one screw. I will say one thing too, and this is just kind of a nerdy personal preference. I want to say a personal thank you to module companies that make the cutouts for the screws oval or rectangular instead of round. Because when it's oval, if it doesn't quite line up in your case, if there's something a little bent or a module is slightly larger, slightly smaller, you can still move things a tiny little bit and fit them in correctly. And when you've got modules that are just the screw, like this one, you have to fit them exactly where they fit on the rails that are underneath. And it's kind of a pain in the ass sometimes. So thank you to these companies who make their openings oval instead of circular, because they give you a lot of flexibility when you're building a case. All right, let's see what are those questions we have. I like the live streams. I learned so much. Good. I'm awesome. That's great. I'm so happy. That's awesome. That's why I do these, is because I want to give people, this chance to interact and ask questions and learn stuff that you wouldn't normally learn from a 10-minute long, hyper edited, quick cut, YouTube video. That kind of stuff drives me crazy, but whatever. Let's see. Yes, you need to make more of those spacers. They're awesome. Herbie, what's going on? Good to see you, man. Welcome. Always love having Herbie on the stream. Hey, they're going to be here live for once. Hey, awesome. I'm glad I was able to do this at a different time, so I'm catching people live that I don't normally catch live, which is good. Are there any other particular 1U modules that you're looking forward to putting in the new case? Something that will change your workflow for the better or open up more opportunities? Great question. Yes, I am going to. So many of you will know this, but I used to use, as my kind of end of chain processing, kind of pseudo mastering for my live sets, I used to use the analog heat plus effects. I was looking for a way to bring one less box with me as I travel. And so I was able to, with the Libre Legio, I was able to get the saturation and limiting and drive that I wanted, that I was getting from the heat plus effects. But the one thing that I couldn't get from what I had module wise was I really like to be able to mono my bass frequencies on my master. So I like to mono everything below like 200 hertz just to make sure I don't have any issues when I'm in the club, and to make sure that the low end kick bass kind of punches you in the chest rather than phase canceling in the room and sounding like mush. So for me, being able to mono the bass is something that I've missed. So one thing that I'm going to put in right away when I get the 1U rows is the 1U version of the Endorphins Golden Master, because that has multi-band effects on it. And so I can take the low band and make it mono. You've got the ability to change your kind of stereo width by band. So by making the low end mono on that, it will kind of take the place of that last bit of the heat plus effects. And so I can have that in the case with the other module that I have right now. And that's going to kind of get me back to where I was before, while still allowing me to carry one less device, having one less power supply, needing one less plug in a power strip. So it's great to not have to carry all that extra stuff whenever possible. All right, I was watching your streams back to back nowadays, hoping to catch if you ever mentioned how you're using pizza with carbon. Is it triggers the sync input and using the internal VCA only? So yes, so with the pizza, triggers to the sync, I use the control. I have it set up so that the control knob is set to be the envelope adjustment for it. It's one way you can set this up. And then obviously volt per octave. And then with the carbon filter, so I can send out, there's multiple outputs from this. So there's an octave, a pulse out, and a main out, all coming from the pizza. So that's why I have a mult next to this, is that I can actually put one into one of these and then I can send it to multiple places. So using the carbon, there is a volt per octave and an FM input with an FM control. So I can take one of the outputs from this and send it to the FM while the other one's going to the audio. So I can FM the filter, I can frequency modulate the filter from the same device, from the same output, just either an octave or a pulse version of that. So that's why I keep those all together, is being able to use them in slightly different ways. I've also swapped out this mult a couple of times for a little mixer. I have a 2 HP mixer, and I can take multiple outputs from here into that mixer and then put those into the filter. And so I can get kind of a fatter sound. And I haven't decided if I'm going to do that yet. I may add that mixer back in instead of the mult, but we'll see. I haven't decided yet. So yeah, let's see what else. Hello, good to see you, welcome. Griffin's is very nice, can't do without it anymore. Yeah, it's amazing. The Griffin's Claws is so cool because, as I mentioned before, I don't like modulation in my case, because since my live sets are totally improvised, I never know, I can't preset up modulation because I don't know what I want things to be able to do. And modulation timing is so important that it takes a lot of tweaking and adjustment specific to whatever you're doing with it. And I just don't have the time to do that when I'm playing live. Cool thing with Griffin's Claws is I can patch out during a live performance, hold record while I modulate something, and then it will continue to do that. So it acts like a really handy way to do improvised live modulation, and then it's really easy to reset and record a new modulation with it. So very, very handy device. Anything new going in the case? Yes, new is the I/O from Boardbrain, because I want to be able to multi-track out. Took out a couple of things that I wasn't using as much, and a lot of movement to be able to put things where they're easier to reach and easier to patch. I've also learned loads. Awesome. Thank you for tuning in. Great to have you. What's good? Also want to pick up the Libre Legio at some point. Yeah, the Legio, like, I have to say, you know, I love the noise engineering stuff, and, you know, Patrick's such a great guy that does all of their marketing stuff. He does their videos and stuff, but they've got this, you know, it's really smart how they have their different platforms, you know. So there's like the Versio for effects, there's the Alia for oscillators, and then the Legio can be like the 6 HP, different things. So again, I had the Ruccileggio because I thought I was going to use it as a filter, and I didn't end up really gelling with it as a filter. So I just flashed the firmware. Now I have the Libreleggio, and it's one of the most important parts of my case. So yeah, it's very cool. It's a great way that they're doing stuff there now. Let's see what else. Plum Audio has some nice little 1U mixers. Yeah, they do. And the thing is, I don't really need a mixer. And because of where I'm going to put these, it's not going to work for the BIA. But having these just having that little 2 HP mixer is quite enough for this. So anyway, so yeah, if you have other questions, feel free to ask in the chat. I'm going to just make sure I'm getting all of the information in the chat. There we go. How's the timing on the Griffin's Claws? I have similar time modulation recording thing with the Bella Gloss in my case, but I find it's a bit awkward to work with. So a couple different things. You can clock this and you can set it to different lengths to record a specific length and then loop. I actually use it unclocked often. And so then I will just free record based on the timing of whatever's going on at that moment and have it just loop from whenever I stop it. And so I'll just do it in time and it works great. The clock does work really well to be able to set the divisions. I haven't really messed around with it with changing tempo of stuff because I'm not really using modulation over time like that, where I would need to change tempo of something that was staying modulated. So I can't answer that part just because I haven't used it that way. But the clock, as far as setting loop lengths, great. And then the free recording mode is also great. Thanks a lot for tips on pizza. Great ideas to experiment with. Yeah, it's such a great module. I love the pizza. It's amazing. That's how much valuable info and tips you would share in every stream. Thank you. That's why I do. Yeah, that's why I love doing these streams too, because like none of this stuff is worth a video on its own. And so this way, and I don't even know what anybody wants to know. So like I said before, it's great with these because you can just ask me whatever questions you have and I can just answer them live on the video, live on the stream. So I don't have to do anything else. So now we are at a point where I have an extra module. Yeah, I wasn't going to use that one. Put that over there with my modules that go back into the big case. So now next thing that I wanted to go through is patching. So again, when I'm organizing this in Modular Grid, part of what I'm thinking about is how I'm going to patch it. So for example, the Polycinematic and the Oxy Coral, I control both of those via MIDI. And they are coming from the Oxy split, those MIDI cables, and the split stays on the right side while I'm performing because it also goes into the black box that's over here and the Noisite drop that's over here. So I put those modules on the right side so that the cables just go directly into those because they're coming from outside the case. I didn't want them to come from outside the case to the middle. So then that cable is another thing that I have to manage somewhere. So those cables are just going to go into MIDI here and MIDI here, and they're just going to go right out of the case. So I don't have to worry about that. So again, I'm thinking about cable management and patching when I'm building out my case in Modular Grid about where things are going to go. So like, here's another example for you. Griffin's Claws, because it can be an attenuator, I like the option of having it next to the PAMs, which can be an LFO. So if I wanted to do some modulation, I could just patch from one of these channels straight into an in right there next to it. And then I can go out from that to wherever I want to go and I can record the attenuation. So that's why I put the Griffin's Claws here instead of, I don't know, over on this side. So again, I'm always thinking about where those things are going to be. Again, the same with the IO. I put it on this side because when I'm recording out to a blue box, that's going to go right here next to the case. So I want to be able to patch there without having to make a mess of anything. And in the meantime, this keeps a lane now because all of the patch inputs right here for the Boardbrain kind of main mixer are all on the left side. So that means cables are going to be coming from all over the case into this side. So what this does, I don't need to touch the Oxy pipe once it's patched, and the IO I won't need to touch during a performance. So that gives me a lane to bring all those cables down right straight into the mixer patch points this way without going over the top of something that I'm going to need to get to when I'm performing live, right? So everything is kind of thought out about how I want to make stuff work. Just like I mentioned before, having a send effect here right next to that, so I don't have to have a long cable going somewhere else that's weird. It can just be right there, right where it's going to be patched to. So it's important when you're building out your organization of your case to think about things like that, like where are the cables going to run. So that's going to be a really important one. Another thing that's important, as I mentioned earlier, is what do you like to do with which hand when you're performing? And it seems like a dumb thing to think about, but from years and years, like 3 decades of DJing, I got used to Pioneer DJ mixers that have the effects on the right side. So I'm used to doing performance effects with my right hand. So that's why I put the Oxymeta right here on the side. And if you guys ever watch any of the videos of my shows or of my live streams when I'm performing, I kind of rest my hand here all the time. So I just have it there and I'll be doing stuff with the mixer and then my hand just goes right back here. And that's something that's like muscle memory, force of habit from DJing. So like it'll stay here, and if ever I want to filter, I've just got it right under my hand, and then I just kind of go back to what I was doing. But that's kind of where my hand naturally rests. And so because of that, I put it all the way on the outside of the right side because I like to do it with my right hand. So again, just think through these things. And the beautiful thing about modular is that you can change those things. Like how many times have you bought a thing and you're like, oh my God, why did they put that knob there? That doesn't make any sense. Like I'll be doing something here and I need to reach across to get to it. And because they weren't thinking about your workflow and your preferences about how you want to perform. And that's the great thing with modular is you build it out however you want to build it out. And then you can make it a way that makes it more comfortable and easy for you to perform with. So that's probably my favorite thing about modular. It's funny because I don't have any modulation really in my case. And people are like, oh, well then why do you use modular? It's not, they think the mod in modular is for modulation, but it's really because it's modular. It's plug and play. It's like Legos. You can take one out and move it and put it in another place. So you have all of these these modular pieces that you can mix and match and plug and play any way you want, and then use them in a way that's comfortable for you. So customize, make your thing, and then make your instrument, and then get out there and play it. That's the way I like to look at it. All right. Ergonomics with cables is huge. Totally. I completely agree. I need to buy a load of right angle cables as the cables in my system are a mess. I use exclusively right angle cables. Now, if you haven't seen this case before, one of the reasons why I use this case, because I can travel with it, this top piece flips down and then this goes into a rolling carry-on. And there is about this much space in between the two halves. And so there is plenty of space to get full length cables in there. But if 2 of them line up exactly right, you risk bending one and whatever. So instead of doing that, I just always use right angle cables, and I've got a ton of space in between things. These cables, just so you guys know, are my absolute favorite cables. And shout out to Chris Cardone, who lives right here in Denver. He is Luigi from Luigi's Modular that makes these cables, if you can see them. Now, I have also really enjoyed the, what are they called? I totally forget the other big right angle modular company. These ones. I've got some of them right here as well. But what's the difference? So if you look, this is a Luigi's Modular, and this is a, oh my God, what are they called? Put it in the chat what these are called. I totally forget the name of the company that makes these. Tendrils. So this is the size of a Tendrils cable versus a Luigi's Modular cable. And if you look at the top, that's where you really see the difference, right? So the tendrils cable is almost double the size of the Luigi's cables. So the thing is that when you've got a whole bunch of patch points right next to each other, with the tendrils cables, they fit, but they all have to be going in the same direction. And if that isn't the direction that makes the most sense to get to where you're patching to, it's really difficult to make it change the way. Then you need to use a longer cable and whatever. With these, they're so small that if I was to patch two things right next to each other, I can turn each one of those like 270 degrees, and they can go in any direction you want, and there's tons of space between them. So I love the Luigi's modular cables, and yeah, you can get them direct from Luigi's. There's a Starving Students Supply, I think is the name of it. You can get them on Amazon or whatever. They ship as well, but I love his cables. So if you're looking for cables, you can get them in any color, any length. I love these short little ones, and he's got some now that are even shorter. I think they're half this length. I think they're only like 3 centimeters, if I'm not wrong, for doing like really short patch points, which is very cool because sometimes you have those in your case. Like I do here, for example, I'll go from the output of the carbon filter to the input of the FX8. So I'm only going like 1.5 centimeters. And in order to do that with these, I'm using a full 6 centimeter cable, and it gives me this extra loop around. So like the little tiny ones are very cool as well. So I would say definitely, if you're looking for 90-degree cables, definitely check out Luigi's Modular. I'm pretty sure he'll be at KnobCon. So if you're going to go to KnobCon, you can't miss him. He looks like the little alien on their logo. He has a big giant mustache. Super nice guy. So definitely hit him up because his cables are the best. I also like the way they're made too. They're like this super flexible rubber. So it makes it really easy to bend them around stuff. And I like to twist them together in order to keep my cabling nice and organized. All right, you mentioned the black box. Do you use Modular to create the atmospheric pads you've got in there? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes I will create them and sample them into the black box. Sometimes I'll use samples that I've made in the DAW, and sometimes I'll use samples that I download. I have been getting samples recently. I'm a big, giant fan of Audio Tent. And they sent me a couple of packs to try out, and I absolutely love their stuff. Like, really cool. And looking forward to meeting them at ADE. I haven't met them in person yet. So, but yeah, the Audio Tent, their samples are awesome. So if you're looking for a place to download samples that are kind of handmade rather than a lot of the, like, you know, you go on Splice or you go on LoopCloud or LoopNet or whatever, and you've got loops that everybody's using. The Audio Tent ones, a lot of them are made from Modular, so you can still keep that same kind of analog modular sound. Yeah, so I love their stuff. So if you're looking for a place to get samples, Audio Tent is great, but then you can also obviously make them in the DAW. We talk about that a lot in my production course. It's about how you can use your Modular to record stuff into the DAW, and then use those bits that you've recorded to chop up to make samples that you can then load into your black box to use in your live performance. So it creates this kind of loop of make the thing, record the thing, use it as a sample to put into your box, to then make more stuff, to then record, and it becomes a cool loop of creating your own gear. So, what else? Where are we at? Tendrils, yes, thank you. What else? What is one of the biggest takeaways from your years of DJing practice that carries over for you as valuable and profitable for playing live with Eurorack? What a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. I love that. There's a lot of stuff that I use from my years of DJing when I'm doing modular stuff. And actually, while I answer this question, before I answer this question, I'm going to start patching so I can patch while we do this. I'm going to try to do two things at once. But the first thing I'll let you know is I patch things in kind of a certain order. And because I have my cables organized by length, I'll decide what I'm going to patch where, and then I'll just use that length so that I can always kind of have exactly the right length to go around the things that I want to. Because Cable management, going around the knobs and buttons is really important for me rather than going over the top of stuff, so I don't patch anything that way. So I usually start with CV and gate for the modules that are going to be controlled by CV and gate from the Oxy. And I've already got them set up in a certain way on my mixer, so I like to try to go that same way when I'm doing the CV gate patching. So channel 1 is my kick, so I'm going to go from CV1 to the velocity input of my kick. So I'm going about this length, so I can use this length cable, right? So 1 into velocity, and it gives me that great length. And then when I close it up, it still works perfectly. So I've got a good length, most direct thing, and shortest cable. Then I'm going to go from gate 1 to the trigger input of that, which I don't think I can use a short one. No, you see if I do that, it doesn't quite reach. So then I'll go back to the next size up, and I'll just go gate 1 to trigger 1. And actually, I lied. I am not, the gate 1 output here is not going to this anymore. It's going to the boom. So I need to go a bit farther. So I need to go from gate 1 all the way over to gate 1 here. Where's my input? Hit. So I'm going to go there. So it looks like this is not going to quite make it. So then I'm going to go to the next size up of cable, and that's going to get me there. So I'm going to go from gate 1 all the way over to hit. So you can see it gives me a path through this kind of patching area on the bottom instead of going across the top of all of the other stuff. I'll explain why I did that later, but it's just the way that I organized it in my Oxy. And I might, you know what, I'm going to change it just because it's kind of a pain. I don't need to do that. Now is the time to make changes because I am in the modular world right now. So going back to the question about the takeaways from DJing. So, and I'm just going to continue on with this. So 2 is hat, 3 is Percon's voice, 4 is pizza, 5 is BIA. So I'm just going to keep going with those. So with that, with DJing, the thing that I probably use the most is trying to create a flow in a live set that sounds like a DJ set and trying to move smoothly from idea to idea rather than jolting from one thing to the other. And that's one of the reasons why the mixer is so important for me, is because I'm using the mixer a lot to make those kind of smooth movements and transitions between ideas. The same way that I would with DJing, except instead of using EQ to get from one produced track to another produced track, I can use the mixer and the sends and things like that to go from one bass line to another bass line, or from one kick to another kick, and being able to use those smoothly and subtly, because the audience is used to listening to DJ sets. I mean, that's, you know, the live audience, especially when you're playing in like a club setting rather than like a modular meetup setting or whatever. The people that are there, you may be the only live act, and so you need to fit in with the DJs. You don't want it to be this kind of like smooth, really organized, really structured sets, and then all of a sudden bleeps and bloops with jerky starts and stops and you know, weird program changes and stuff. So trying to keep that whole design idea of going from one to the next in a smooth way is something that that definitely comes from the DJ world. So yeah, that's that one. Let's see, where are we going to? Tune. That's right. So you see, I'm trying to keep these the right length, and I'm kind of selecting the length based on the distance. So if I can get away with a shorter one, I'll use a shorter one. So can I get to from 3 to trigger? So you see this one is just slightly too short because it goes across these modules and I don't really like that. So I'm gonna take that out and I'm gonna go to the next longer one. And I would rather go a little bit more, have a little bit more slack and be able to still go around. And so that way I don't have to worry, about like it interfering with what I'm doing here. That's the last thing I want. Audio tent or high quality samples? Yes, they are. Boardbrain mixer looks so good. I grabbed the WMD Performance MK1 recently as they were a good price, but it didn't have stereo send. Yeah. So the WMD Mark II is all stereo channel, stereo sends. Like they really upgraded a lot of stuff for the MK2. The MK1, which I have in my studio case over there, it's great because it's pretty small for what it does, for having 8 channels, and it still feels like a performance mixer. It has long faders and stuff, but it does have things like, I love with the Boardbrain that the effect send knobs are big. So you have a lot of fine control over how much you're sending. And if you're using that to really play your show rather than just like set it and forget it type of sends, it's important to have those big knobs that have some good resistance and you can really play it as an instrument rather than, the little tiny knobs and buttons can be a real pain. So I'm not the biggest fan of those. So when you fit in with DJs, do you create sound on your earpiece and then fade it in? No, I do not pre-cue anything. I did at the start when I was very first starting off in live performance, and I realized that as soon as I would cue in my headphones and start to think about what was playing, what I was going to do next, I was no longer playing the show. It was just kind of going on its own, and I would lose track of the vibe. I'd lose track of how long things were playing, how quickly I needed to make a change, or because I'm doing the modulation. So if it's not happening, if I'm not doing it, it's not happening. So if I would go to cue in my headphones, listen to something and I'm tweaking it, I'm not modulating anything else. So that's getting boring for the crowd. So I prefer to do things live without listening to them, just by knowing positions of sample or not samples, positions of modules, and being able to put those knobs where I want them and have a pretty good idea of what it's going to sound like. And then once I bring it in, I'll adjust really quick and I'll get it to kind of sound exactly the way I want to. So no, I don't pre-cue anything because of that, because I found it was a real detriment to the live performance. Also, how are you finding the BOEM after having it for a few weeks now? It is fucking great. I love it. And I will also say, I still love the battering ram. And I keep getting asked which one's better. And that's like saying, whatever preference of two things that are similar but really totally different. The battering ram is an amazing kick if you need a kick, and that's what you want. The BOEM is also an amazing kick, but where it really shines is the groove and the performer being able to have this whole system of kick, rumble, sidechain, effects, all of that stuff in one group, like one system of stuff. So it is amazing for what it does. But if you only need a really awesome sounding kick, it's overkill. It's not what you would want. And I would say every time, go with the battering ram. Battering ram is also way smaller and can do some really interesting things like outputting inverted envelopes to be able to send to sidechain things and all that kind of stuff. So the battering ram it's still my favorite kick as a kick by itself. But as a kick system for live performance or production, the BOEM is killer. It's just amazing. It does all the things you would want kick, rumble, sidechain, effects, all of those to do. So it's crazy. Yeah, it's awesome. It's really, really awesome. Yeah. Let's see. How important is it to play in front of people when performing? Couldn't you make a great live performance without an audience? I don't know. Be a little more specific about that, because yes, you can, like, I can do live performances here. Like if you listen to the Rinse FM set that I did, that I posted online, I recorded that here in the studio, so I didn't have an audience. I always prefer an audience, and I always find that I do better. My live sets are better when I'm doing it in front of an audience, because I'm being inspired by the audience while I'm playing. And so, they'll give me ideas. I'll get a reaction that's awesome. And that means, okay, cool. I know they like that. So I'm going to lean into things like that for a little while. So I find that I personally perform better when I'm performing in front of an audience. But yeah, of course you can do live performances anywhere. My own personal experience is that my live performances, when I do them, tend to be less interesting and less kind of inspired if it's just me in a room by myself. I find that I personally do better when I'm inspired by a crowd, but personal preference thing. Let's see. I love the idea that you mentioned in one of your previous streams, when you want to slow down the vibe without changing the beat, you switch to a heartbeat pattern on the kick and dropping 4/4 later again. Yeah, I mean, it's a great trick for changing tempo without changing tempo. Is if you've got something keeping time, whether it's a kick or a hat or whatever, change the number of them that you have, and it feels like it slows down if you reduce the number down. Or if you add in more, it feels like it speeds up without actually changing tempo. So yeah, it's a fun one. Do you have other such simple techniques in mind for steering and shaping the vibe during an hour plus show? Yeah, I mean, my thing is always be listening as if you're part of the audience, and you'll feel like when you're listening to somebody play music, you're listening to a track, you'll be like, oh man, it would sound so good with this. Well, consciously think of those things when you're playing live and make that sound, do that sound. So if it's like, oh, I wish there was a ride, okay, bring in a ride. Or if I wish that the kick would drop out, drop the kick out. Like you can do those things on your own when you're playing live. So let yourself be free enough to do the thing that makes sense in your head that you should be doing at that moment, So I would definitely suggest that kind of stuff. Also playing the gig with no cue is badass. It says a band member would play. Yeah, I mean, I like that idea that I'm playing with my gear. It's not just that I'm playing my gear. So there are things that will happen when you're doing an improvised live set that will be unplanned, and they will surprise you and inspire you if you let them. And too often we go into a set saying, here's my planned set. And if something happens that's out of that, even if it's better, it freaks you out because it's not the way it was planned, and you'll say, oh, it's a mistake. And then you try to avoid it rather than saying, oh, that's a cool, weird, new, interesting thing. I'm going to lean into that. And so that's why for me, improvised live performance is such a beautiful thing, because it can really be an expression of the moment, right? You're soundtracking what's going on in the room at that moment. And instead of trying to recreate something that you made in a room by yourself with no crowd, no vibe, no lighting, no reverb in the room, no people jumping up and down, no lights flashing, you didn't have any of those inspirations. And so you made this thing, and now you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. You're trying to make that thing that you made in another place fit this place. And it's kind of like a pre-recorded DJ set. How do you know what the crowd's going to respond to? How do you know what the vibe's going to be? So you can't pre-record your set, right? And for me, live performance is exactly the same thing. Unless you are not really a live performer, but you're more of a producer, and you want to write songs and then showcase the songs that you've written. It's more like kind of like a singer-songwriter mentality, where I make music and then I put on an exhibit of the music I've made. And that works in kind of like modular meetups and those kind of things. But when you're playing a warehouse party or a club night, your primary function is not to feature your music. Your primary function is to create a vibe with the people that are there that they really enjoy. And so going back to those ideas of what I bring from DJing into this, that's something, is that mentality of, I'm not there to show off how good I can do. I'm there to make sure they have an amazing time. And I'm going to do it using music that I make and music that I like. I'm not just going to like, play crappy stuff because that's what they want to hear. My challenge as an artist is to write things that they will have a great time to, that they've never heard before, right? And so that for me is kind of the artistic endeavor of the whole thing, if that makes sense. All right, where are we at? I'm gassing over the Bohm. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Seems like the M4 solved a big problem in Modular in an elegant way. They did. I saw somebody else post recently, there's a thing that's called a kick aid, which is a module that can go with any kick that does kind of rumble stuff in one single module. I'm curious to see it in action and get people's feedback on it, because something like the battering ram with the kick aid would be pretty cool to be able to do rumble stuff. Oh, this does have effects and sidechain and all of that stuff, so you would need a lot more modules to do that. But yeah, I think they've come up with a really elegant solution for a particular kind of drums. So, did you try the taps out of the Bohm Groove Expander? Yeah, it's the kick envelope, which is pretty cool. So yes, you can use it for those same things like you can on the battering ram. If that's what you'd like to do. I have to say though, I wish that it was a separate audio out of what was coming out of here, because I would love to be able to send that to something different and maybe affect it differently. That would be pretty fun, but that's the only place where the Bohm is kind of limited, is it all works together and comes out of one set of outputs, including your master, if you're going to be using the sidechain function, which I do. So that becomes your master out. So it's not on a separate channel. So again, for multi-tracking, even with the IO or with other stuff, I can't isolate the Bohm in this audio path, which is, a bit of a bummer, but it's worth it for the sound. It just sounds so good. All right, what do we got here? I used to think that kick-based rumble is really sensitive and requires mixing. How different of what you have in the live and how you treat it if you record a track. Now that I have the Bohm, I don't treat it any differently. So this has its own volume over here for the rumble side. And then this is the volume for the kick, so you can actually mix those two together. And then you have fine control over all of the parts of the rumble. So the taps for the rhythm, pitch, length of the rumble. You have an effect here, which I use as a low pass filter, because I like to be able to filter out the rhythmic taps and just use the low end sometimes. But you can change that effect to be different things. And then you have different types of color, which all the way to one side is just the drum taps. Then you mix into drum taps with reverb. Then you go to reverb and white noise. And then you go from white noise to sub bass. So you can have all those different options. So it becomes really flexible. So it's very much the way you would do a rumble in a DAW. So it's not really different at all anymore. And the sidechain the same, because your main is going into the performer, and you can decide how much sidechain you do, and then you can mix it with the amount of drum. And then you've also got an effect, which I have this set as a high pass, low pass DJ filter that only affects the kick. It doesn't affect the main mix coming through it. So if I want to affect the whole mix, including the kick, I use the meta. And if I want to filter just the kick and not anything else, I will engage this and just use this filter here. So super flexible. It's really, really flexible. All right. Great tips and advice. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Seems to be live acts also in Eurorack that doing their stuff, not much talking or reacting to the audience. They do great sets, but it doesn't seem to be affected by the crowd. Yeah, I mean, talking to the audience, I'm not a huge fan of, but if you mean that more abstract of talking as far as like an exchange and interchange, yeah, I totally agree. And I think part of that is because frankly, there are a lot of hardware live performers that are not performing improvised live. So they don't really have a choice. Like, they've created a set and they have to play that set. They can't go out of it. They may have set tracks that they've built, and they built in a little wiggle room to improvise here and there with a certain voice, and that's great. I mean, I'm no knocking that. For me, I just find that I lose a lot of flexibility with my sets when I do that. I'll give you an example. I played a set in Berlin during Super Booth at Urban Spree, and I ended up going. They changed around the order of the show. Day of, and I ended up going after a guy named Tomo, who you might have seen on social media. He plays like 155 BPM, really hard techno live. And going after him, I couldn't play my typical kind of 140 hypnotic. So I had to modify my whole idea of how I was going to start that set, transition from him into me, what I was going to play day of or like live on the fly during the show. So I couldn't have had a preset set and played my slot correctly, right? Now, if I was just playing a modular showcase somewhere, I can play my set. I can play whatever I want to play, because you'll go from one guy playing drum and bass to somebody else playing ambient to another person playing techno to somebody playing deep house to somebody playing experimental bleeps and bloops. So there's no real continuity to the nights. You don't have to worry about playing your slot. But when you're very much like a DJ, you have to play your slot when you're playing a club night or an after hours. And if you don't, that's on you, right? It's they expect you to have the amount of ability where you can come in and actually play whatever slot you're set up to play. And so being able to do that improvised live allows you to be able to do that no matter what gets changed or modified last minute. So, important thing. Let's see here. Where are we? James, when performing live, do you rely on the monitors for fading in sounds on the mixer, or the levels gain staged prior? Seems like some of those more subtle effects elements would need to be dialed in live. Yeah, I dial everything in live, and monitoring is always shitty everywhere that I play. And so one of the things I love about the Boardbrain monitor output device is that it has its own separate headphone out with its own level. And so I use in-ear monitors that I plug directly into here. And so I hear my mix clearly in my in-ears before it goes out to the house. So I don't have to use what's going on in the house. Now, that said, one thing that I do adjust ahead of time when I am able to get a good quality sound check is I will go play a bunch of different sounds, particularly my low end, kick, bass, rumble, that kind of stuff. And I'll put something playing and I'll walk out into the dance floor so I can hear what the room sounds like, because sometimes the room will have a lot of natural reverb, or it will have, or maybe they'll have too much sub in this club. It has too much low end. So I can then adjust that back. I can dial back how much sub I'm sending out, so I'm not overpowering that and just making it sound like this just low end wall of mud when it goes out there. So some stuff I set ahead of time, but most of the stuff I'm mixing live and using in-ears to be able to hear it correctly. But keeping an eye on what the room felt like during sound check, right? All right. Maybe the whole setting with lights, noise, the audience, etc., will still affect the performance. Yeah, it totally does. I mean, for me, at least, totally affects that. Hope for that too, but it's still an awesome view. Yeah, it would be great if you could have separate outputs, but whatever. Similar question before, but would you consider the boom strong enough to replace kick, rumble, sidechain you would use when producing a track rather than just for live performance? 100%. The stuff that I'm producing now, like I've produced for years, and a lot of it was in the box and a combination of in the box and hardware. Now I'm producing exclusively with my live performance rig and my studio rig. I'm not using any stuff in the box except random samples now and then. So if you hear a kick in one of my productions, it came out of this case. it wasn't a sample kick. It was from something else. So absolutely 100% the quality is good enough to produce with. James, well, stressful. I bet that was thrilling as hell. Yeah, it's great. I mean, I love it. That's why I do the improvised live thing, is because for me, it's more fun. That thrill, the excitement of, damn, this could totally go off the rails. That's exciting to me and fun. And it forces the focus. It's kind of like those things where those kind of Zen things where you get so intensely focused on something that it just like makes the whole rest of the world disappear. That's kind of what this is like for me. It focuses me on the event, and everything in the outside world is gone. So any work stress you have, or you're not feeling great, or someone in your family's sick or whatever, you can put all that aside, because it has this like Zen focus on what's going on in the room at that moment. What in-ears are you using? Are you happy with them? So right now I am using, I've got them right here. I am using these, which are Sennheiser. I think they're the 100s. And I've been using these for a little while. I got them because they were cheap, and they had good reviews as far as the sound quality goes. And I wanted to try in-ears. So that's why I got those. And I've been using them ever since. Now, I am hoping, I've reached out actually to a couple of in-ear companies, and I'm trying to get some different companies to send me some things to try, because I would really love to do like a real legit comparison between in-ears. I haven't tried enough of them to know what's good and what's not. And everybody I talk to has a different preference of which ones they like. And there's such a broad range of in-ears available now, because so many people are using them for different things, that it's really hard to know what would lend itself to specifically what I want to do. I need something that has a really flat sound so that I can mix. So I need something that's basically, and the Sennheiser are good for this, I need something that is basically the quality of studio monitors that are giving me a flat mix, so I'm not overpowering something or underpowering something, because the drivers in the monitors are making me think there's more or less of a thing than there actually is. So I'm looking for something that has a really accurate flat sound. And the Sennheisers have been great for that. So I'm not anxious to switch. I really like them. But if there's something better out there, I'd love to try it. So, do you have experience with Manus? Sounds very appropriate for industrial techno, perhaps, but I guess the BIA is more flexible voice. It's funny you say that, because I'm actually thinking about, I've been using the BIA. It's one of the first modules I ever bought. It was in my very first case. And I've been using the BIA since then. It has never left my case. But I'm thinking about swapping it out for the Manus soon and giving it a try. And I want to get the Alea, so if I don't love it, I can just flip it back to the BIA. But yeah, I do love the sound, and I've played around with it at the shows, like at the noise engineering booth. But I'm thinking about getting a Manus. I'm on the fence, but I love it as well. Love that sound. Hello, I think it's dangerous to line check an empty hall room, especially for sub-bass treatment. I mean, yes, but with enough experience, that as soon as there's people in the room, that they're going to absorb a lot of sound. And interestingly enough, they tend to, when there's people in a room, they tend to flatten out the sound rather than absorb one thing in particular. You'll find that the people will prevent high-end sounds from getting like reflex echo in a room, like big concrete room is the high-end sounds are gonna be super tinny. And as soon as there's people there to absorb those sounds, they mellow out. And with low-end sub sounds, it kind of depends on where the subs are in the room. If they're only in the front of the room, the crowd will absorb them. Where if they're in multiple places in the room, the crowd won't absorb them at all. So it just kind of depends. And you have to keep that stuff in mind when you're sound checking, but you can get a really good feel for the actual sound system itself. Is it sub heavy? Is it high end heavy? Is it mid heavy and sub light? And you can get that general feeling of kind of like a frequency curve of that sound system and make adjustments based off of that. I'm not gonna pretend like I'm acting like a mix engineer in a nightclub with a live performance where I'm changing everything up, because there's no way to actually get that to that detailed of a sound, and you're just going to end up making yourself crazy. So getting generalities of the room and generalities of a sound system is really important, but you're never going to, it's never a treated room. And that's like, I don't know if you've ever heard of Junkie XL. He's a producer from the 90s, and he now does movie soundtracks. He famously does like super well-known productions and super well-known movie soundtracks, and he mixes them in a totally untreated room, because he's like, if I can make it sound good here, it will sound amazing in in a treated room. So like, it's always funny to me that he's at this kind of amazing level, and he cares more about the production and less about the micro details, where most kind of novice producers and performers get so caught up in the micro details that they forget about the big picture. And really, in a live performance and in production, the big picture is way more important than the details, right? Nobody has ever been in a nightclub and said, oh man, if they would have just changed the compression threshold settings off of that thing, that track would have sounded way better. And if you are, you have no life, and you should be partying and not doing that. So yeah, so it's, for me, the sound checking in an empty room is not to get the details, it's to get the broad frequency spectrum curve of the room kind of in my head, so that when I'm mixing in my headphones, which is a good quality mix, then I can say, oh, okay, I'm touching the important bits, right? All right, let's see. Preach. Yeah, man. In-ear comparison from your perspective would be invaluable. Yeah, I would love to get it. I can't afford to buy a whole bunch of pairs of in-ears to try it out. So if they want to send them to me for a shootout, that would be great. Let's see here. What I can say with experience is that Eurorack sound dynamic is very much more cleaner and dynamic than line level instruments. That's the good point. Yes and no. I mean, a lot of it depends on the output. So for example, my whole rack is coming through an analog mixer that is then going through a line level processor, and it's coming line level out and going to a mixer. So it's not coming out at Euro rack level, it's coming out at line level. That's being converted here. It's being converted in the mixer. I have gain per channel to be able to adjust those levels. Yes, they can be clean. The signals can be cleaner, but a lot of that depends on how you're using them. Do you have things overlapping one on top of the other, making your mix muddy and doing all those things? So it's hard to say your rack sounds better. I disagree with that. I mean, as a broad statement, I don't think it sounds worse either. I think it's all up to who's operating it and what you're doing with it. It's very easy to make a Eurorack system sound bad, and it's easy to make it sound really good too. So you just have to, I think it's more up to the person operating. You have to know what you're doing, and you have to practice, and you have to get a good feel for the sound. And again, like I said, focus on what's important. Don't worry too much about all those little tiny details, especially in an imperfect room and an imperfect atmosphere. It's more about the energy you create, the vibe, the actual songs you're making, and less about the setting details of the audio quality. So, personal thought. James, I'm in love-hate relationship with the Manus. Yeah, it's got its things for sure. Let's see, a person who picked up a budget IEM rig recently, Behringer clip-on amp, and $30, $40 random brand. Yeah, I think IEMs, in-ear monitors, as a rule, always sound better than monitoring in the room, because it's just like, unless you're playing at like the best clubs in the world, most clubs don't take any time to really focus on the quality of the monitoring in the booth Or often as a live performer, you're not even playing in the booth, you're playing on the floor, then you're listening to it from the room. You've got different, different delay amounts from one speaker to the other. You've got stuff bouncing off people and walls. And so monitoring is hard. And in-ears, for me, have just been a great way to kind of focus the sound. Also, my hearing is a wreck. And so in order to hear certain things, I have to turn up booth monitoring really loud, and that just makes it even worse. I find with in-ears, with good isolation, I can keep the volume much, much lower. So I'm damaging my hearing less, and I'm hearing better detail than I hear from the booth monitoring. Let's see here. I suspect I'm just having skill issues and need more practice getting the Manus to know more. Yeah, I mean, I would say you're not far off, because I agree with you. I've tried the Manus, and what it sounds like, it sounds great, but for me, the BIA has more range, and that's why I'm not 100% sure that I want to switch. I like the diversity of sound of the BIA, but the sounds that the Manus does, it does way better than other stuff. So I'm on the fence. Maybe I'll decide it at NobCon. I'm that one with no life. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. For me, I try to put it myself in the perspective of the punter, of the person who's in the room at the party having a good time. And for 99.9% of those people, they couldn't care less about those little details. They care about the flow, the rhythm, the sound design, the groove, the energy, all that. They care about that stuff because that's what they're feeling. That's what they're going to go away with saying, I loved that performance because it made me feel a certain way. And so when I play, I'm playing for them. So when I'm in Berlin and you're in the room, I'll know that you're paying attention to my details, but I still won't care because I'm playing for the other 99.9% of the people that are in the room. And if you can do that in a way that makes the audiophiles and gear nerds happy, awesome, good for you. But if I have to prioritize one over the other, I'm going to prioritize making an amazing, fun, interesting vibe, energy, groove soundtrack to the night. And if that means that I have to sacrifice a little detail in, compressor settings and whatever, I will gladly make that trade-off. Let's see here. Oh, nice. I really should be try pairing it with some filters. Yes. Yeah, if you have the Aaliyah version, try the BIA. That's the big thing with noise engineering, man, is that you can get one if you're deciding between two different modules, get one and then flip the firmware, try the other one and see which one you really, really like. They came up with a good idea. I really like what they do. Let's see. How do you handle volume differences between modules, especially when they're very loud? I have to attenuate my Ergonomics baseline because it's almost distorting with the gain of the mixer fully down. I am right with you. Ergonomics baseline and the battering ram are ridiculously loud modules and they need to be attenuated. So in my last case, one of the modules that I took out that didn't make it into this case was this, which was it's a 4-channel attenuator, and I had the baseline and the battering ram both going through my attenuator going into here. The reason why I pulled it out is that when I get to NobCon this week before my show on Saturday night, Adam is going to change out the board in my mixer for one that has a lower noise threshold. So it's going to make it so that when I turn the gain all the way down, it starts from a lower place. So these hot modules don't need an attenuator. Otherwise I needed it going into any mixer. So I'm right there with you. So if you have the baseline or the battering ram, I would suggest putting it through an attenuator before it goes into your mixer. Yeah. So I will need to gain it up probably once I get the new board in here, but it's worth it to me. So totally agree. The Aaliyah version also has the envelope out, which I use for the filter cutoff as well. Oh, nice. That's very cool. Had a BIA previously and regret selling it, planning to get an Aaliyah at some point. Yeah, I would love to sell my BIA, the Alter version, to get the Aaliyah version just so that I could try out those others. All right. Honestly, Eurorack builds are like endgame character builds in RPG game. Yeah, I totally agree. If you hand them over to someone who doesn't know the game and build, they won't play any good. I totally agree with that. And I agree. That's kind of goes back to what I was saying before. It's more about the pilot and less about the plane. I could give somebody, like somebody could give me their case and I would play it differently than they would. I could give somebody my case and they would play it differently than I would. And so you still have to operate it. Nothing goes by itself. I mean, at least not the way I play. I don't build patches that I press the button and they play themselves. That's not my thing at all. So you have to actually play the module or play the modular, and then it becomes a user operator thing and less of a gear question, right? And that's why it's hard. Honestly, I get asked questions all the time. What's the best to this or what's the best to that? And there is no answer to those questions because the best for me is not the best for you, because I will use something differently than you will. I love certain modules that friends of mine hate. They love certain modules that I can't play with. So it's just like, you have to find what works for you. And for me, that's the thing I love the most about modular, is that you build your instrument. You make the perfect combination for you. And it's not about, I'm not telling anybody these are the best modules in the world. I'm telling everybody that these are the best modules in the world for me. And if you think like me, they might be great for you. And if you don't think like me, you probably would dislike a lot of them. So it just comes down to everybody's personal preference and workflow. Let's see. There are people who can slay with just a drum machine and a single synth. Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. Ironically, this chat full of modular people is not the typical club audience. Yes, true. A good chunk of the audience wouldn't differentiate between a DJ and a live performance electronic music. For me, that's the idea, is that you don't want them to be able to tell the difference. I mean, you do and you don't. You want them to enjoy it but not understand why, right? So you don't want it to sound sonically dramatically different just to be different, because then it's going to interrupt the flow and the vibe of the night. Where if you kind of fit in with the night, then you want it to sound good because they enjoy the music you're writing, not because you just sounded different than everybody else. Now, obviously you want to keep it sounding as good as it can, but yeah, I don't think the point is to be different just to be different. Totally. You can attenuate the battering ram by holding down the button next to the drive knob and turning the drive down. That will attenuate it down. Yes, you can, but it also changes the output sound, unfortunately. Because so you can, the level is the input level into the drive. It's not the volume level going out. And so if you're putting a lower volume into it, you're attenuating on the way in, the drive will not react the same way. So that's where, yeah, it's not, yes, you can. You can also, that level also has to do with the velocity. So if you've got something plugged into velocity here, like I do, I use that to add dynamics. And when you're changing the level that way, you're also adjusting the low and high of those dynamics. So if you reduce it down, you also lose dynamic range when you're sequencing velocity. So I sequence velocity a lot for drums and percussion so that I can change, like, instead of just having just an accent, I like to have subtle velocity changes. And so that's what allows you to do that. So yes, you can, if you're not using those other things. But if you're using those other things, then yeah, it's not the best solution. So that's why I'd rather keep that range and attenuate on the way out. So basically you're just attenuating the top of that whole range rather than squishing down and making the range smaller, if that makes sense. I don't know if it does or not. Agree about the baseline there. Yeah, I don't know why the baseline's so loud. Why did they make the output of it like so that it just clips every mixer? I don't understand that, but I don't know what their logic was behind that, but I guess whatever. It sounds great. So maybe that was part of why it sounds great, but yeah, interesting thing. So we've talked a bunch about patching in CV Gate. I showed you how I patched these first couple. A couple of other things that I patch here just quickly. So the Oxy also brings in clock. So everything is clocked from my Oxy. So I will take my clock there and put it to my clock on my PAMs. And then that makes all of these divisions of the clock that I have a lot of control over that I can use to clock the rest of this. And there's also a reset, which goes to run on the PAMs. And here's the thing. So like I was showing you before with these Luigi's modular cables, if you notice, like if I had to put these a certain way, it might make the cable just go over there. And that's where I get like kind of tripped up with the tendrils sometimes. So with this, if I want this to go over the top of that, I can just flip it over and then I can bend this around and say like, oh, if I move it over here and have it go down that way, it totally moves it out of the way of my module. So then I don't need to worry about it getting in the way and kind of tripping me up while I'm playing live. So that's a thing that I love about these Luigi's modular cables, is they have a lot of flexibility with how you can route them. So anyway, that's sick of the noise engineering. Do the Aleia modules. I have a Starlab and the Magneto has the same panel layout with a different DSP, but you can't try the other one. Yeah, they've done a really good job at noise engineering to create these different, so they've got the Aleia for voices, the Versio for effects, and the Legio for the 6 HP, slightly different things. So yeah, they're pretty cool. So anyway, so this is clock is going into here. Now I need to clock a few things in the case. So one thing that I clock is the Endorphins Ghost. So that's going to be a clock in that's going to go right straight across from there to there. And look, that fits perfectly with not even any slack. And it's great because I don't need to mess with anything down here. So that's a good one. Then I also need to clock the boom, and it's over on this side. Now this is going to be more of a challenging one. Do I go down and across, or do I go across and down? I think I'm going to go down and across. So I'll use one of these longer ones. Let's see if this gets me. I think that'll work. Going from here. I'll put it around these so they kind of hold it in place. Oh, and then it doesn't quite get there. So let's go for an even longer one. That's why we have different sizes. So then we're going to go from there around like that and all the way down here to clock. And now I've got some slack in this because it's a longer one. So again, I can turn that and make it go over here. But what I'll probably end up doing with this is later on, once I've patched other stuff, I'll take these longer cables and spiral them around. So it kind of helps tie everything together as like a cable tie for managing. So I still try to keep everything in that same kind of center path. Aforementioned Versio platform modules from you are also great for effects. Yes, I love the Versios. Would love to hear how you use the Griffin's Claws in your current case. So the way I generally use it is when I play live, I usually have a couple of these like random, like longer patch cables, and I use a different color just so that I can see what they are when I'm performing. And so if I get an idea, so let's say I'm doing something interesting with the, I don't know, let's say I'm doing something interesting with the filter on the Ghost, and I want to keep that going while I do something else. I'll just patch to one of the outputs here, and I'll just go over here to filter on the Ghost. Is that the filter? Yeah, cut off CV. So I'll just go to the filter of the Ghost, and I'll just turn up that CV, so then it can start to work. And then So you've got erase, direct, function, rate, amplitude, sync, and offset. So what you can basically do is save and erase are both here. So if I hold this and I just move the knob however I want it to do that modulation, when I release it, it will keep doing that modulation. So it records the modulation and then sends it out. So that's if it never has anything coming into it. I don't really use it as an attenuator and as a way to record attenuation. I use it as a fixed voltage source that I can record the output of. But you can use it either way. I just tend to use it this way. And then when I'm done doing that, I can just unpatch this. And if you just hit erase, that's cleared. And now I can use that again. I've got 4 of those sources there so that I can send those out to other things. Sometimes I'll also patch like an LFO from the PAMs into 2 of the inputs. And then I can use those as attenuated LFOs. But I don't generally use those, so I probably wouldn't patch those ahead of time. So that's how I use it, and it's been super handy. Where are we at? Oh, cool. All right. So anyway, so that's how I patch the clocks. So I need a clock for here, a clock for here. And if I want to clock anything else, I would clock it out of the PAMs because it's really easy to change clock divisions into these really interesting divisions going out of there. So that's generally what I use that for. So then imagine that we've done this through all of these. We've patched all of the different CV and gates. Then the next thing I would do once I patched all the CV and gates is I would patch the audio path coming back from the modules. So just using as an example the BIA, so you can see the way that that would get patched. I would go from the output of the BIA. That screw's loose. That nut is loose there. Go from the output of the BIA to the input. And again, using little tiny cables. So I've got my little loop there. And then I would go from the output of the filter to the input of the effect. And the effect is stereo. So I've got 2 stereo outputs coming from this module. So I would go from one of those, and again, I'm going to go down here, down this way, and then into the mixer. So the BIA is channel 5. So that's going to get input right here. Get another one about the same size. And that's going to come around and go in here. So I've got mono voice through filter into going mono into a stereo effect and coming out stereo. And now I've got this a little bit longer so I can kind of run this around. Maybe what I'll do sometimes is I'll take this and I'll say like, oh, I'm gonna move this and put it just over the top of that cable so that it holds it in place. And I might do the same with the cables that are going into the baseline. So that way it stays out of the way and it comes down this path we talked about at the beginning. I don't need to mess with the pipe once it's done, so I can have all the cables going over it. And I don't need to mess with the IO once it's done, so I can have cables going over that as well. So it gives me a clean path going into this side of the mixer. Now these voices, the warp, the polycinematic, and the oxychoral, the ones on the right side are going into this expander, and those inputs are over here on purpose again. So their audio path is going to come down this way and across and get patched rather than having to go all the way across. So again, I was planning this based on where I have my mixer channels, where I'm going to place the things. So these go here because MIDI comes in, which means I want them in channels on the mixer on this side so that they can be patched more easily. So again, trying to use the shortest possible cable. So maybe I'll take one of these. That's a little too short. I've messed up my system here. Yeah. So then I can go, if I'm going from an output here in the polycinematic, it can go all the way around, and it's going into, we're going into 8. So here, so you see I've got a path that goes around and stays out of everything's way. And then I can wrap those together, and then this will be all one kind of clean path. Should have, there we go. I knew I had something a little shorter. So I can go out from here down like this and into 8, and it still makes it around without going too far and having too much extra. So I always try to use the shortest cable I can, but so that I can still go all the way around. So anyway, that's what I do with that kind of patching. Back in here. I have to drop now, but we'll watch the rest later. Thanks very much for the tips and discussion, everyone. Thank you for joining in. I have a Lapsus Osprey Noise Engineering now, which is basically the same thing without the memory. Yeah, it's I have a Lapsus as well, and this can act just like the Lapsus. But this is not just a 4-band attenuator. This is specifically designed as a modulation recorder. I think there's a Bastel one that does something similar as well. I could be wrong. But anyway, what really makes this one special is the ability to record, because like I said, I don't pre-do any modulation. So being able to get an idea, modulate it, record the idea into memory, and then move on to something else while it keeps going is an interesting way to add modulation during a show without having to pre-plan it in advance. And so that for me is what the Griffin's clause is really great for. So anywho, all right, let's see. So yeah, basically that's how I would patch each of the modules. Last bit here that I think is important. First, I'll just show you really quick. I'm going from effects send 1 into this right here, into the Dismodus. So again, short cables in and in, and then return 1 goes from there right into return 1 here. So you can see this is why I put the module where I put it, so that I could get this really tight patch and not have to go through the whole case to get to it. Like if I had all my effects up here and I was trying to patch up to that, it would just be more long cables. So this keeps things really tight. So that's how I do the send and returns, is have them go out just like that. Then the one thing that I wanted to show you too is just kind of like the final signal path out of the mixer once everything is set. So I go out of output A. There's dual mix outputs on the Exelon mixer. I just use A as my kind of main output, and that goes into the input of the BOEM, which is right there, so that the sidechain can be used from the kick for the entire mix if you choose to, or you can turn it down, doesn't really matter. So that means the whole mix is going through there. Then I take the main out of the main BOEM module, which is the whole, everything including the mix, and that goes into the Oxymeta. So now the meta is taking in the entire mix, including the kick and the sidechain and all that stuff. So it's truly a master effect, just like it would be in a DJ mixer, over the entire mix. And then I go from the outputs on the Oxymeta to the inputs on the Legio, which again is the Libra Legio. So there we go. That goes to those two inputs. I try to go around. I might do this one a little longer, so it keeps all the way around. So those go around, and then the output from the Libra Legio goes left and right into the one of the two input channels on the monitor, which is my final output module. And now this has balanced outputs, stereo 1/4-inch outputs. And so that's my output to my mixer here in the studio, but it's also the output to the house when I perform live. And then this is where I have my headphone jack, so I can plug my in-ears into that. So what I'm hearing through my in-ears is my final mix of everything as it's going out to the house. So it gives me a final in-ear mix of the whole thing. So I have a good picture of everything, including master effects, sidechaining, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, CV and gate comes in, goes out to the modules. Audio goes from the module through the filter, through the effects, then from the effects into the mixer, and then from the mixer, I've got sends, and then the main out goes into the boom, comes out of the boom into the meta, comes out of the meta into the Rucciolégio, out of the Rucciolégio into the monitor, and then from the monitor out to the house. And that is that. Let's see here. Anything else? Any other questions you guys have? Tried to go through all of the setup. Like, this isn't how I use it. That's for another video, which if you've watched these, that's what I usually do, is how I use it. If you haven't seen one of those, now's the time, because now you're gonna have an inside look at how everything is set up, and then you can kind of watch a video and see me use it. I posted recently my live set that I did for Rinse FM in the UK. It's a 2-hour long live set. It's posted audio on SoundCloud and on the Rinse FM website, but it's also, there's a video that I took while I was recording it. So it's a full live video with different camera angles, so you can see what I'm doing while I'm playing that. And now you'll have a better idea of how things are built and routed so that I can play it that way that's in the other video. So the idea is take a look at this and then go see how it's used in the other videos. So let's see. Last stream you mentioned loving to go from the Legio into the Golden Master for low-end mono. Tried that, but the Golden Master introduced a lot of high-end noise and no way to fully disable the compressor. Yeah, it's I won't go from the Legio into that. I'm gonna go from the Meta into the Golden Master into the Legio into the monitor, because I want the Legio, because the Legio has a gate, a noise gate, and I know Endorphin's modules in general are really noisy. The Ghost is a really noisy module, and so the Golden Master I know is a noisy module as well. So I want it to be able to go through the gate in the noise gate in the Legio. So that'll be able to take care of some of that noise, and then the noise will not affect the saturation that's added in the Legio. If you're going the other way, you're putting a saturated signal into a noisy module, and that's probably why you're getting that. So I would say flip those, and you might get a better outcome. Okay. Let's see. Really cool set. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. It was a lot of fun to do. Thanks for tip. Yeah, you're welcome. That's why we're here. This is Tipville. That's why we're here for this. So yeah, but you know, it's funny. Something that we've been talking about all along is, why is modular cool? Well, one of the reasons why modular is cool is that if routing it one way doesn't work, route it a different way, and it might work. And you get to kind of figure it out and build the perfect thing, which I still find amazingly interesting, and it's my favorite thing in general about modular. I'm going to do a shameless plug now. September is going to be the last cohort of my 2 courses for a little while. And so if you're interested in taking my Improvised Live Performance course, which is a 1-month long course, you get 50 videos. There's 8 group Zoom calls where we do Q&A sessions. Those are all recorded, so you can watch them after the fact if you want to. You get feedback on your live performances. You get to be part of the online community of all the people that have taken the course, all of that stuff. So if you're interested in doing that, September cohort starts next week, and it's going to be the last one for a while. So if you're on the fence, now's the time to do it. There is a 30% discount on the website right now. So if you go to circlelive.com/courses, there's a link in the description of the video. You can sign up for the courses, and we'll get you into the next cohort. There's also a cohort in September for my hybrid production course, which is basically how I use my live rig, multi-track, non-multi-track, all of that with DAW. I use Ableton, but it applies to every DAW. There's nothing that's really Ableton specific. So you can do that course as well. I teach people a lot how to perform into the DAW and capture that, record that, and then how to edit that and turn it into tracks or turn it into samples and different things that you can then load into samplers and then replay in your live sets. So how to do a bit of both, how to use the DAW for what it's great for and how to use live gear for what it's great for. So if you're interested in either of those courses, now's the time to do it. circlelive.com/courses. It's really all I do to support this channel is these courses. I don't do, paid sponsored videos. I don't do any of that stuff. So this is how you can support the channel if you'd like to. So I would really appreciate it. If you're interested at all, please join in. And yeah, I think we're gonna call it there. But thank you guys very much for joining in. I appreciate it. I hope you learned something with this and maybe it demystified a little bit about how you build the modular and made it a little bit less nerve-wracking or gave you some tips that you can use if you already knew how to do this. So thank you guys very much. I really appreciate you guys tuning in for this. Hopefully I'll see some of you next week at KnobCon or in Dayton for my show on the 4th. So if you're gonna be at KnobCon, definitely come up and say hey, and I look forward to seeing you there. So thank you guys very much again, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.